Hello everyone, welcome to South Coast Reptiles YouTube channel. In today's episode we're going to be talking about the fat-tailed gecko and how they compare to their more common relative, the leopard gecko. So obviously the African fat-tailed gecko, as the name suggests, are from West Africa region, so like sub-Sahara Africa kind of region, whereas obviously leopard geckos you find in Afghanistan, Pakistan, them kind of regions. So two completely different places, but they're both very similarly related. They both have movable eyelids, for example, and are extremely closely related, and people can even, I hear, I've not seen it done, but apparently you can crossbreed them if you wanted to, but generally that's not advisable because of mixing genes and so. So obviously to compare Oreo to a leopard gecko like Lizzie, we're going to do through different categories to see how they compare in that. So obviously the first category we're going to go over is their handleability. How easy are they to handle? How easy are they to train to handle? Obviously, leopard geckos are well known for being very laid back and very chilled. They very rarely bite, they're not very flighty, they won't try and run away. Obviously, fat-tailed geckos, they can be more flighty, and apparently, they've got quite a powerful bite. But obviously, like Oreo here, for example, just simple as gently pick them up, scoop them up, nice and easy, just like so. Now, Oreo's not very flighty at all. He hasn't bitten me yet. I'm over around about a month, but he still hasn't bitten me yet. But obviously, that's Oreo. So handleability-wise, pretty much the exact same as a leopard gecko. Same way you'd handle your leopard gecko. Just pick them up, scoop them up. Don't obviously pick them up by their tail. So obviously they can detach their tails like a leopard gecko can. So obviously do not pull on the tail at all. But obviously just scoop them up from the body and hold them just like so, and that's perfectly fine. Next category we're going to go into is their care requirements and how they compare to leopard geckos. Now, as the care requirements are very similar to leopard geckos. For example, leopard gecko basking spot temperature is about 30 degrees. With a fat tail, Oreo specifically, we have them set up to a 31 degree basking spot. So obviously we achieve that with a 50 watt DP projector, with a thermostat in control of it, and it's on a timer, so during the day it's at 31 degrees, and at nighttime temperatures we only let it drop down to about 23, 24 degrees, which Oreo seems very comfortable. So Oreo being more active at night because he's a nocturnal species of gecko. They're not crepuscular like your leopard geckos, like active dawn, dusk, whenever they fancy. Fat-tailed geckos are generally nocturnal. They venture out only during the night. This could probably be attributed to the fact of being from West Africa. They are from a region with a lot more predators and a lot more predator-related incidents than the leopard gecko, for example. So a very common thing for fat-tailed gecko in their environment would be termite mounds during the day. So what they do is they dig a little burrow into the termite mounds, and the termite mounds obviously being solid, built by the termites, they protect them from predators and that. This is also where they'd lay their eggs in the wild. So they really have a very much a symbiotic relationship with the termites, obviously sharing their homes with them, giving them a nice secure home and all the rest of it. Obviously we replicate that by making like a moist hide and their hides in their enclosure. But obviously care requirements wise, obviously as we just said, temperatures vary the same. The main difference between a fat-tailed gecko and your leopard gecko would be your humidities. Leopard gecko, they like their humidities be around the 20 to 40% mark, whereas a fat-tailed gecko would be a percentage of 40 to 60 percent. So 40 to 60% humidity, I should say. And that is what they prefer, because that's what's more commonly found in their natural environment. But as for food and all the rest of it, obviously exact same feeding as a leopard gecko. For example, you can feed them things like Morio worms, or you might call them super worms if you're from America. Also got things like your general locusts. If you live in the UK, I know in some places in America you're not actually allowed locusts, but in the UK we are luckily allowed them. Obviously, crickets, pretty much a staple of any reptile diet. And obviously just your bog standard mealworms, just the same as everywhere else really, just nice, easy, small, easy to keep hold of meal for your fat-tailed geckos. But obviously a big difference between a fat-tailed gecko and a leopard gecko would be their size. Whereas a leopard gecko can max out at 10, 11 inches for some larger leopard geckos like Lizzie, for example. Your fat-tailed geckos are going to be around about the 7, 8 inch mark. Some very large individuals can reach 9 inches long. But obviously, generally rule of thumb is your fat-tailed geckos will be smaller than your leopard geckos, for example. So with leopard geckos and fat-tailed geckos, obviously you will need to supplement their diet with certain supplements. For example, here we use this, which is Calcium Pro from Arcadia. Obviously, it contains essential calciums, magnesiums, and other vitamins they require to have a healthy diet. So obviously these are all vitamins they would naturally get in the wild from their food sources, but obviously being in captivity, they don't get those resources in captivity, so we are required to supplement their diet as needed. So the next category we're going to go over is their hardiness. What I mean by hardiness is like their general ease of care, for example, and obviously some animals, for example, such as chameleons, are not very hardy. If you don't do it right, you're going to have a disaster, whereas other species like leopard geckos and fat-tailed geckos, generally, if you mess up a little bit, it's not the end of the world. For example, if you forget to put their heating on in the morning or don't turn the lights off, it's not a do or die situation for them. Obviously, always do your best to look after your pets and your animals. But obviously, sometimes life does get in the way. People just forget, human error. But obviously, with your fat-tailed gecko, same as your leopard geckos, he's seen the superworms and he's hungry. But obviously, same as your leopard geckos, for example, the fat-tailed gecko is an extremely hardy pet, so they are very good for children, for example, because obviously you'd have to go drastically wrong to hurt your fat-tailed gecko. Obviously, the only thing with that I'd say is, sure, we mentioned the handability bit, but obviously they are a soft-bodied lizard. This isn't like, you know, your bearded dragons, species of monitor lizard, tortoises, turtles. Obviously, you feel them, they do have quite a soft skin. So obviously, with very young children, it's probably not the best pet idea, because obviously they can be easily damaged if handled roughly. But obviously, for older children and for young adults, as long as you're gentle with them, they are literally the perfect little pet for you. So we're going to go over the next category now, which is their availability. So basically, how easy is it for you to find a fat-tailed gecko if you want to get one for your reptile collection? Now, unlike leopard geckos, a leopard gecko, you will find a leopard gecko in pretty much every reptile store you ever visit. Leopard geckos for a very long time have been in the reptile hobby. There are hundreds of different morphs you can get, from midnight blacks, tangerines, raptor morphs with their eyes. There's such a variety of leopard gecko morphs. There's a leopard gecko morph for everyone, basically. But obviously with the fat tails, where they're not as well known and they're not as well bred, there are less morph available. Obviously you can get different morphs. For example, this is an Oreo morph, but you can get things like Oreo whiteout, striped morphs, and other such morphs. Obviously people are breeding them. They are becoming more popular as years go on. Obviously as they get more popular, people will start producing different kind of morphs. But general terms of finding one for yourself, they can be quite difficult. We went through, I think, 4 reptile shops until we found Oreo at one of them, and he was the only fat-tailed gecko in the entire shop. So we were lucky to find him when we did. But obviously part of availability is their cost. How much is your fat-tailed gecko going to cost you? Now, same as leopard geckos, the more rare the morph you're trying to get, the more expensive they become. But as a general rule, your basic standard morphs for leopard gecko and your fat-tailed geckos, the fat-tailed geckos will be slightly more expensive, normally ranging from the £80 to £100 mark for a completely normal wild type fat-tailed gecko. Oreo here being an Oreo morph, he cost us £200. But they some of them more like pronounced, like Oreo whiteout morphs and stuff like that, they can go between 3, 4. Some of them that are very, very obvious with their morph kinds can be up to like £500 for certain morphs out there. So generally, fat-tailed geckos are more expensive, but obviously that comes with how hard they are to find. But if you want to have a gecko, say if you're choosing between a leopard gecko and a fat-tailed gecko, if you've got friends that have reptiles, it's not very likely they've got a fat tail in their collection, just because they're not as well known of in the reptile hobby as it is. So to summarize the video, your fat-tailed geckos are just as handleable as your leopard geckos are out there. Moving onwards to their care, Care is nearly identical to the leopard gecko as well. The only main difference is, where are you going? Obviously the main difference in their care requirements is just the fact, obviously, they prefer it more humid, up to like the 40-60% mark. Then moving on to things such as their hardiness and their availability. Obviously they're very hardy species, very good first time reptile pet for people who are just looking to get into the reptile hobby. And availability, they are harder to find than a leopard gecko, but you will be able to find them. They're not like, you know, near impossible to find. You'll probably be able to find a breeder on websites such as Morph Market, for example. There's usually always a few on there. Just means you might have to travel a bit far from your home to pick them up, obviously depending on where the breeders are relative to where you are. But as far as fat-tailed geckos go, they are amazing first-time bet. The Oreo here, very handleable and are very enjoyable to have. So from me and Oreo, that will be everything from us. So hope you've enjoyed this video. If you could hit the like and subscribe button, it does help us out a lot on the channel. But obviously that is it from us. So goodbye and good night.